Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in jihadi organisation. For more than a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.
This conversation between Carlton King and Mike Kilgannon is presented in two parts. This is part one. Take it away, Carlton and Mike.
My name is Carlton King, and my job is basically to lift the light, or shall I say the shadows, off the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection. Now, if you've been listening to my other shows, you'll know that I was in the game for, around about 30 years, and have been in every part of Britain's secret intelligence and national security apparatus, as well as in some of the United States. As you know from what I've said from the show previously, one of the things that I do is I bring on a guest, a famous person, and that could be an actor or actress, let's say a footballer, or the Olympics are going on now, so let's say some sort of athlete, person from government, or a politician in general. It could also be an entrepreneur. And this is who we've got for you today. Businessman entrepreneur. People in the know will know who he is. For us normal folk, as are outsiders, we won't know. And that's just already one synergy with my world, because he's known in his world, but he's not known generally outside his world. The name is Mike Kilgannon. Don't forget it. And he's probably affected your life, even though you don't know it. So Mike.
Very well, Carlton. How are you?
Very well, mate. Very well. Now, what I want to do first is basically just get a feel for you so the listeners can understand what you've done. And as I've mentioned in the show before, I know you have an interest in the secret world, so we can maybe go into some things later on that issue. But right now, I'm going to give you the floor. I want you to tell me, number one, why are you famous? And then I'll come back and ask you some questions.
So my name's Mike Kilgannon. I'm just a normal guy. I've just had an extraordinary life, very similar to Carl, just because we entered a job, and because I was in the digital innovation and I entered it as an experienced person, my late 20s, early 30s, when it was the beginning of what's the digital revolution, you just go on the flow of that, the tide of it, don't you? It takes you along with you. So very simple background. I started with a big company when I was 21. Alcatel, world famous telecom company, and I won one of 5 positions. Just they're commonly known as fast track management programs, where you do everything. You're making coffee, you're wiping the floor, but that's a fast track management call. They call them kickstarters now, I suppose. And you just learn the ropes from the floor. But the beauty of that is the McDonald's principle, isn't it? You actually understand the job. So it doesn't matter whether you're the GM of 300 people, which I ended up being, or whether you're a starter, you can flicks into them roles or jump into those roles. And that's what made me good at what I was doing. That if there was an issue, I could jump on a phone, I could go out selling, I could go out solving a problem, because I'd done those jobs. You see it now, and they call them the secret millionaires. Yeah, I know a lot of very wealthy people. I don't know whether the word entrepreneur exists anymore, because a lot of them go in with funding and they start part successful anyway. Whether they could start it, as I was taught, a corner shop and build it by adding pieces and doing a roadmap, I don't know. But it's just the world we're in. My journey is very simple. I just entered technology, capital equipment, infrastructure, whatever name you want to ring fence it as a young man. And as the internet came along, I had the knowledge, experience and the mindset where when they wanted a person who could explain what the internet meant in the public domain, rather than being behind a closed wall, I could speak to an engineer, or I could speak to an investor, or I could speak to a person who wanted to buy it or use it. So all that's happened, and a lot of people call skills I've got, is I've just been grandfathered into an industry for the simple reason I've got experience. I've also got a lot of certifications. All I would say is I have worked with people, the certifications are off the scale. They've come from all the top universities in the world, but you put them in an operational role and they were no better or no worse than someone who would come off the streets. Because the reality is a certificate just means you understand process and structure. Doesn't mean you've got the experience to handle the pressure of a job. And that's basically the forefront of it. So if we just ring fence it and say that when I started, there was no web pages.
Let me step you right there, mate, because everybody today knows about web pages in terms of there are web pages everywhere.
Yeah. So it's really simple. I just had a network of people who come from telecoms. They come from putting lands and WANs in, and HTML was an unknown code at the time. It had to be handwritten. So just through one of my contacts, I can't go into much detail. You know, these people, they touch the secret services because the things that they do get not surrounded, they get wrapped around what the secret services do. He ended up as the main man in PayPal because we were the first in technology, and PayPal was a startup. And when they came into the UK, they wanted all the people who understood startups. So going right back to 93, 94, when the internet was really coming out, everyone knew what it was roughly. But it was in the early days of build it and they will come, because there was only 2 or 3 web pages. It doesn't matter. So I saw people, it was funny really. So, you know, I mean, I understood the technology, and you'd be like, how much have you paid for that web page? Well, I paid £50,000 over remortgage my house. This is 30 years ago. You know what I mean? You're talking a semi-detached house. But they had multi-million-pound businesses because there wasn't anything else there. They were the first movers, but they were just guys who they thought, well, I'll have a go. And I saw where the mistake was made. There was the early days of the gold rush where if you build it, they would come because there was no one else there. So there was no e-commerce engines. There was no CRM platforms. There was just, can you build websites? And through my contacts, this particular guy was a visionary. He just said, I can train people to build websites. We can build the authoring tools with the tech we've got, the contacts you've got. And that's what we did. We knocked on the door, all the big ISPs, Yellow Pages, Thompson's, you name them, the list is endless. Yeah. And all we said is, when you move in from paper to digital, we've got an outsourced solution. And it was that simple.
Let me ask you something, because I know you also did something with mobile phones, which is the thing that would have affected most people who listen to today. Explain that.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, we started off, and it's really just content. So the first way people could touch content was through a web page. Yeah. So we got larger and larger. We had about 300 people who worked for us. Gig work, a lot of it. If there was work, they got paid. And as that grew, it grew into 2 specialist sectors. One of them was just building websites, and the other one was building legacy integrations, i.e. you've got a database that's trapped in a bank. You want to put it out. So we were the first movers in that. There were lots of others. We had some skills, and we had the foresight to position ourselves with credibility. So what basically happened, late 80s, we'd had 5 or 6 years at it. We had a good business. It had just reached its natural place. And mobile was coming along, but all mobile is, I wish I could say it was something exciting. To a telecoms guy, it's just a mast at the end of a piece of infrastructure. All that it is, again, because I've come from the early days of it, communications, the most important communication is person-to-person communication, which was voice. Carlton speaking, that's voice, that's communication. But the next thing is that people were using simple phones, weren't they? And they were ringing each other, which is voice. But I was a big evangelist in text messaging, which was an engineer's piece. And I said, basically what it is, text, it's easy. So when engineers are talking about something discrete, they just text each other, this is knackered. Couldn't say in front of a guy who spent £1 million, could they? But they could text, couldn't they? That's how it started. This machine is knackered. Yeah. So really, all that text is, it's discrete voice, isn't it? Yeah, it's limited.
Did you make that universal?
Yeah. So what basically happened is, again, through contacts and people, I knew guys who were heavily involved in successful businesses. They knew that we had got some investors in what we did, and we were separating that business away because we had different visions. And my partner had been a sort of approach to winter banking and PayPal. So it was a natural move. There was no fallout. He was going left, I was going right. I still enjoyed the technology. I still enjoyed the evolution, and just mobile was the next thing. It's just an interface. It's a user interface. So instead of you phoning them, let's go on the phones. Some guys I knew, they were friends of mine. There's no point hiding behind that. I could pick up the phone and speak to them. I said, we've got all this skill. We've done this. We're separating the businesses. Some of the guys want to stay doing it. Some of the real forefront guys want to move on. And they backed us. They came in. They had very little understanding of it.
So would that be like today, what would we call them? Angel investors, unicorn investor type people?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They were just angel investors. They had a lot of money. They did it for tax breaks as well. In 1999, he's got it on his wall. He laughs about it. I drew the internet, and I said that phones would evolve into smartphones, because I'd worked with all the telecoms companies, people like that, Ericsson, but obviously I'd been around them. I'd seen their visions, because they had this vision years ago, because they have to, because that's R&D. And basically I predicted that ultimately smartphones would turn into apps. He's got a picture on his wall. He framed it because he said, Mike, he said, if you told me that's where it was going, I believed you. He didn't even need to see a business plan. And all he's got on his wall was a handwritten picture.
Is what you do?
The internet. Yeah, some artist. He's got it. Yeah, so he put 5 million quid in on that, and a picture, because he believed in me. He's got it on his wall today.
I can remember some years back, when I was doing some stuff, you just happened to be around, I was talking to you. And
Yeah.
I can remember you saying, and I know it's been scuppered by the 2008 situation, but I remember you saying that you were then, I hope I'm okay to say this, you were then R&Ding around something that was an idea that said, when you're 18, we are going to, stop me if I'm going into areas you don't want to go into. When you're 18, you would have already have had the makeup of an individual, whether the individual had gone to university, whether they were an A-level student, whether they left school at 16. And then what you'd say is, right, on this individual, we can provide this individual with £5 million and we'll send it through the post. So here's £5 million, mate. All you need to do is sign up here, because then for the rest of your life, you had him in the banking system. And that was a system you were working on. Now, if the person had gone to, I don't know, Oxford, here's £30 million. There's your £30 million system. You had spoken to me about policing that process, I recall. How could it be policed?
Yeah.
So were they really thinking of taking an 18-year-old and mortgaging him to the hilt for the next 70 years of his life?
Yeah. So basically, the challenge that you have with the internet thing is, in the early days of data protection, there was no protection because ultimately people didn't know what was going on. They didn't realise that the internet of things is also the analytics of things, and they had free license to legally, this isn't illegal. I mean, it wasn't like it is today where people have got a ring fence behind general data protection regulation. Legally, people could write predictive models, and the more devices you had and the more information you shared and the more access they had to your information. I'm talking governmental agencies, people that would walk past you in the street who had data-driven marketing. They probably had much as security services. Yeah. So basically what they were trying to do is predict a person's life, and you can, but there is 2 or 3 major catalogues in this country who took that onto another spectrum. They're not allowed to do it anymore, but I've seen them before, where they could tell you, they could ring fence on algorithms the people that would stop paying, and they would have bets to name to see if you get close to the street or the name of the person who would be first to stop paying, because they had the data. They could put them into sex, couldn't they? You know, technology. I don't get excited about technology. I get excited about what it can do. People don't seem to grasp that technology now is so advanced. Just if I say hello to someone and it's recorded, that person's known. So anything that person does or I do, it can ring fence together. You don't have to shake someone's hand and sit next to them. It's a different world. But yeah, I mean, what Carlton's saying, yeah, I mean, wasn't me per se, but it was bankers. And it's called a credit score, isn't it? It's called predictive lending, whatever you want to call it. And they're just trying to identify how they capture that person today, yeah, and how they lend them money. I was only talking about it a few weeks ago, 13, 14 years ago, when I saw that start, how that now has become more prevalent than ever because the banking system's in trouble. They can't lend. So they're going to have to go back to, why have we lent them money? How can we lend them money?
Sort of stuff you were doing years ago, basically.
Yeah, but it's nearly ran several times globally. But, you know, I mean, Carlton's travelled the world. There's places in the world where they don't have banks. You know, and there is, you know, they bank off the 2 mobile phones touching each other. They bank on trust. They bank on bartering. So those systems are actually the oldest financial systems ever. 2 human beings swapping something on trust. It's just that banking replaced that. So all banking is regulation. They've removed the trust by making it regulated. But sadly, when regulation fails, there's nowhere else to go. You got to go back to trust, haven't you? So really, the ultimate regulation is, do I trust you?
Yes.
That's regulation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so all we're basically saying is that all these predictive things they were saying is, do I trust that person to give them some money? Let's identify them. So it's just the same thing.
This takes me back to, and again, the synergies between the secret world, if you will, and maybe a bit less secret world, because I can remember when I first started working for the Americans, and I worked for an organization called the Army Air Force Exchange Service. And basically what it was, this is Cold War days. So in the Cold War, Americans have got bases all over the world. And don't get me wrong, they still have them now, but in the Cold War, it's much more important. And so what they had is to keep the troops happy. So in Europe, example, USAFE, the United States Air Force Europe, 200,000 people. United States Army Europe had something like 600,000 people. A lot of people. And then with the dependents, that's millions of people all around Europe. And they were spending trillions of dollars keeping those people there. So they wanted to give them all the comforts of home. And if you take into account that originally what they had was, they came into a war-torn Europe after the Second World War, and there was nothing there. So they set up these whole housing systems for themselves. So they had housing, schools, petrol stations, cinemas, shops. whatever. So they had an agency basically that provided all of that. And I was a detective for it. Now, Walmart was the biggest commercial entity in the world. Second was AFES. Incredible. So they had all this, they were moving all this stuff. So what does that mean? Take into account when there's nothing on the local, imagine the fraud, imagine the tax evasion, imagine all that going on, imagine the cigarettes being sold or the cars being sold. So that's what I was looking at, all that sort of stuff that was going down and how all that, if you remember Harry Lime, remember that, the third man? That sort of stuff. So I was investigating all that sort of stuff. One of the things they had, and this is what I was going to come into, was they were doing what Walmart was doing. See, Walmart had a system back in the 50s and 60s whereby you walked into the store and you didn't know, but subliminally inside the music that came in when you walked in the 50s, 60s, 70s, actually, somebody was saying, take that chocolate bar. And inside it, you can't really take it on board, but your brain takes on board. It says, take a chocolate bar, take a chocolate bar, take a chocolate bar. So what they knew was that, yes, some people would just take the chocolate bar and steal it, but the average person would take the chocolate bar and pay for it. And that's how they'd sell goods. So it's incredible, isn't it? Again, using behaviorism, make people buy stuff. And that's what they were doing in AFES. They were doing that. Take this, take that, take whatever. Until, of course, it became illegal. And so you couldn't give subliminal messages out. But that's what you were talking about. You're talking about people originally coming up with an idea. Now we've got it. Let's have this bloke in hot for us for 70 years. And then the regulation catching up. That's kind of what you're saying.
I think what happens with regulation, and I love regulation because regulation means that there is control and structure. So even if it's self-regulation, i.e. you've stolen from me and I'm going to stab you, there's a repercussion for your action, isn't there? Yeah. So in a strange way, some things where people get arrested, they were regulating a wrongdoing, weren't they? That guy's stolen something. That guy's offended my wife. That's outside what that policeman can do. So sometimes people get confused about regulation. They think that guy's bonkers. No, that guy's thinking I've got a moral code and he's broken it and I've got to stop him. Now, what they don't realise is you might have hurt him, killed him, but it'll stop him doing it again because he was going on a path. And that's the way I look at it, because all that happens when you do something wrong and you get away with it, you do more wrong until something stops you.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's only because I've been behind the engineering and I've worked on the dating sites, I've seen what goes on. And if you don't regulate something, then people have parameters. The parameter is, how far can I go?
Are you a gun for hire, Mike? Do they come to you and say, hey, listen, we're going to put it in place, mate. Just make it happen.
No, what I do is it's simple. So unfortunately on my journey, I lost my mum and my son within 6 months in mid-2000. And although I'd seen a lot of things and I'd enjoyed it, it stopped me in my tracks. And what was unfettered and the things that Trevor was talking about go on, but digital, it's called AbTech, or it's called, basically, you probably see it every day, where I looked at that, I spoke to it on my phone and now it's in front of me. Well, that's what Trevor was talking about. It's subliminal pointing. That's what technology does, yeah? So when you go on these places, and you wonder, it's because they're just tracking you. You've touched the digital device. When you touch something digital, it knows what you've touched. It's sensitive. So digital assets, they've got tracking all over them. That's what cookies are. So if I go on a page, I know I'm on that page. And if you don't touch something else, you've left. So they'll re-engineer it to make it sticky, or they know within 3 clicks what they'll do. So it is subliminal and it's legal because they're not speaking it to you. They're just trying to move you along, aren't they? It's behavioural, yeah? Because at the end of the day, consumerism is based by spending. So if you actually think about a vicious circle, if I've got no cash, I need credit, yeah? And then when you've got loads of credit, how can I get him to spend it? Because then I'll get my money back. So that's how it works. Give him some money, he'll buy something, and then it'll come back into my bank, and I'll lend him some more, yeah? So basically, where we've come to is it's really just economies to me. I don't think of it any different. It's just an economy. The trouble is, I believe in mixed economies. So in some countries, 99% of it might be highly regulated, yeah? But there's still 1%, as Carl's just said, that's going on because that's human nature, isn't it? I need to make some money and I don't want to pay the tax, so it suddenly becomes I'll buy and sell it for cash, yeah? So it doesn't matter where governments push the line to. There'll always be a line that human beings, because they're the ultimate machine, they far beyond, they'll find a way of breaking that, won't they? Moving it, increasing it.
That's a very good point, because look, 20 years ago, actually, 80s, 89, something like that, Pablo Escobar and drugs. Okay, so my game was not narcotics. My game, as you know, secret intelligence world, government actions. But the way that I was in on it from I was in a special branch at the time looking at it, was from the perspective of narco-terrorism. So what you had was terroristic activity based on narcotics, because the narcotics currency, and thereby destabilizing the state of Colombia. Yeah. And I could foresee in future destabilizing the state of Mexico, Ecuador. And those things have come to pass, particularly in Mexico. It's a killing field. So I could see that. So the perspective was, at the time, people in the UK from Colombia, what are their actions? What's going on? Who are they corrupting? Who are they buying? Blah, 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 blah. Now, my perspective on narcotics was looking at the Falsehood Act, which was better known as prohibition, was why not just regulate this thing? Because if you regulate it, you will take out of that all of the behind the scenes money, and you'll bring that behind the scenes money forward. And in those days, if you think about it, cocaine was cocaine. And if you think about, let's say, marijuana was marijuana, whatever, the fact that it was illegal made the dealer add other elements to it. So he adds bits to his normal marijuana, which makes it skunk, and then makes it much more dangerous for individuals. Because, of course, it's a challenge, because he can get caught and go to prison. So he wants to make it worth his while, doesn't he? So this is what happens. Or you get some cocaine and you cut it down, and the dealer at the street level now, he gets pure from Colombia, say, and at street level, he used to cut it down to make it worth his while, because he's going to prison for a long time if he's captured. Yeah. The reason why you end up with crack cocaine is exactly that reason. Can we sell high volume from this good cocaine? Can we sell high volume? So this is before all of that, and before that undermining individuals to the level where now there's some questions about, if you legalize it, what would be the problem, the additional problems. So my point was, as with the Falsehood, it had to be, as in the end, in 1933, they had to change it and say, it's no good making alcohol illegal, because this is what it's caused. And it's the same with narcotics. You're never going to defeat it. So my point was, in that time, why make that sort of stuff illegal? Why not control it so governments control the flow? And the reason why I'm saying that is because, can you remember back, and you may have heard about it, the ice cream wars? Can you remember that?
Yeah.
The ice cream wars up in Glasgow cost the death of something like 10 people. It wasn't the ice cream. It was the fact that there was money in selling ice cream. So they were all fighting to get the ice cream vans, in which then, because they had the ice cream vans at these particular flats they had, they could then sell whatever else they wanted to sell from the ice cream van, which wasn't just ice cream. But the fact was, it was making money, and it's money what people are bothered about.
So I agree with that. So I've seen hundreds of top-end consultants with their amazing methodologies. I mean, I'm a qualified project manager. It's true, I believe in Agile. The simplicity of Agile methodologies, the simple ones, the lean ones, is to keep everything very simple. Yeah. So if you just look at the world, I've got my own slight methodology. It's a variant of all of them. But in tech, when I'm involved in it, I just put 4 pillars up. So I say you invent something. That means you try. Yeah. And what you do, you've got an invention. So in technology, you call it paperwork. That means you write it on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And when you raise investment, every time you build something, that goes to software. So you rub something off. So you might have 20 pages, but everything you build becomes real. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in technology, it's dead simple. You turn paperwork or an idea into software, and you do a minimal viable proposition, minimal marketing proposition, and you go out and learn how to sell it. Now, the moment you've got revenues, it becomes business as usual or ordinary. So it's 4 simple things. I invent something, I make a product of it, I make money out of it. And if demand is there, it becomes business as usual. And then you scale and regulated it. So why can't everything be like that? There's a guy selling some drugs. He's wrapping them up. He's getting 50 quid for it. There's a big demand. To me, might well just regulate it, because the demand's there. It's business as usual. So why isn't the world that simple? If something is happening, they've tested it, people are productizing it and swapping money. It's business. You just regulate it. Then it's not boring, is it? So all these drug dealers, in my simple view, is just innovators, just a product, and the demand's there. What you're trying to say, you're taking freedom of people using something away. Now, what is going to change, and this is what COVID has done, people understand more the damage of what they're doing to themselves by taking that drug. So the health's going to regulate it. So to me, we've lost 40 years of money that could have been in state systems by trying to stop regulating it. But what is pushing back is the health system. So when you touch that drug, you'll have a device that will say, if you touch that drug, you'll take 6 hours off your life and you'll decimate 3,000 brain cells. Now, that's your choice. Why don't we take the tax out of it anyway? Because you still buy it. So all that's happened, I live my life by them 4 pillars. The moment it's ordinary, people are buying it, it's commercialised. So just regulate it. It's just a business, isn't it?
And I guess that's what I was arguing. I was arguing that most people die taking drugs because they're not what they thought they were taking. Because you don't know what you're taking. Because some guy's mixing it with rat poison, he's mixing it with petrol, he's mixing it with whatever. And more importantly, the gangster who now is making the money. See, because the reason why I came to that, because I did a sort of or had done, because nobody works alone, had done an estimation of the wealth of the Medellin and Cali cartels. I mean, these guys were making more than the gross national product of Colombia. I mean, how are you going to combat that? How are you going to combat people who make more money than the state? How are you going to combat people? And people say, oh, the police are corrupt. On this one, I was working with USDA and our customs, which are the customs and excise in UK, had a national unit, special national unit. And some of our guys are doing some stuff. But the point is this, people say they're corrupt, the police in Colombia, right? How do you regulate a system when you're the chief of the police, there's 600 people in your police station, if not more, you've got armed guards with, now it'd be M4s, but in the past it'd be AR-15s or something, standing at the front. A guy walks past them, walks up into your office, knocks on your door and says, the lead or the silver? The choice is yours. Yeah. Because the silver, the lead, means not just you, it means all your family's dead. And the difference is that in Britain, that's an idle threat. In Colombia, you know that's real. You're thinking to yourself now as a chief, which way do I want to roll? Yeah. And then all the government's taking money from these guys anyway. Corrupted your system. That's narco-terrorism. You've corrupted your system. The whole of your economic and political system is corrupted because it's too powerful, because there's too much money in it.
This conversation between Carlton King and Mike Kilgannon is presented in 2 parts. This is part 1. Tune in next week for part 2. Carlton King is a real-life working-class spy, bringing you the details, the stories, and secrets from his life spent spying. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple iTunes, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss any of the excitement. This is for your ears only.
My name's Carlton King, and I'm an ex-spy.
This podcast was produced by a podcast company. If you need help with your podcast, simply visit apodcastcompany.com or email Jason at apodcastcompany.com.